All right. What's up, Valerie?
Hey, Dr. Tiffany. How's it going?
It's Tuesday, as I like to say. The Tuesday is
Yeah,
Tuesday. It's off. The week is off to a good start. What about for you?
I am. I'm good. I'm just trying to get in the habit of saying I am okay, regardless of what's going on. I am okay.
hmm I like that. I like that a lot. Our words have power. We don't have to, live in delusion, but we can also be positive, have a positive outlook on how we want our week or our day or even that moment to go. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely words have power. So
So I feel like I'm really glitchy tonight. Um,
I don't see any glitch.
no glitches.
Mm-mm. No, you're good.
Okay, just checking. I mean, this live stuff is you just never know what the stuff is gonna do.
Yes,
So
that is very true. We are here
if you say
and
we're good.
yeah, we're good. We're good. I can read clearly. Everything's good. You never know what's going to happen until you hit that go live button. That is definitely for sure.
Right.
Okay, so last week in our Tuesday talks, because we're here every Tuesday, 9 o'clock Eastern. Last week we talked about um, behavior in school, how teachers and parents can respond to behavior situations at school. We gave some great tips and suggestions for parents and teachers. So if you didn't catch the live, please go back and catch the replay. I think you'll get some great information. And this week, we wanted to kind of build off of that, right? And really talk about something that you brought up, which I thought was amazing, which is seeing beyond the behavior. Share with us a little bit about that.
Well, like there's a lot of times as an adult in a school building where you just have these certain kids that we start labeling as behavior problems.
hmm
And in my teaching, I've noticed that the behavior problem kids, if I look past the behavior that they're displaying and I
Yep.
start thinking about what is this thing really, like where is it coming from, a lot of those kids, their behaviors actually say I have leadership potential in me, and I
Mm,
may be using that leadership potential in a way that's not positive.
gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I feel like it's our job as the adults, teachers and parents, youth leaders, I think it's our job to kind of search for that and
I agree.
then decide how can I how can I cultivate this in this kid.
Yeah. And when you framed it that way to me, it was like I had a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, because really, you see the behavior, you see the outward appearance of the behavior, and you can start to label it as such, either chatty or bossy or headstrong or defiant, and you label it, but you kind of reframed it in a way that I hadn't thought of before. Was there a moment where you experienced something in your day-to-day teaching that drew you to that point of kind of reframing the way you see the behavior?
Oh yeah, like first year teaching right off the bat. Everybody looks at that as like the worst year ever that you're ever gonna have. And mine really wasn't that, but I do remember this one female student that I had.
hmm
And I could tell right off the bat that like everybody fed off of her. It was if she was in a good mood, then we were gonna have a good class day. If she was not in a good mood, then it was gonna be me and her button heads going at it, and the other kids just kind of like they're watching, but they're taking her side until they got to
hmm
know me. And then you could see they were like torn between the two, but they were still gonna go with their peer,
Yeah.
right? So it was like just one day I just decided to like have a conversation with her and say, hey, listen. And this was 18 years ago, so it wasn't verbatim, but I was like, listen, when I look at our class and I think about how everybody acts, they really feed off of you. And to me, that means you're like a leader because you have all this influence amongst, the other kids in the room. And she's just kind of looking at me like, whatever. And I'm like, no, listen. So I need us to work together. Like, I'm here because I need to teach you guys some things. And it would really help everybody learn, including you, if you and I were on the same page. Yeah. And so I don't think it was that first conversation, but after having a couple of those conversations and then finding moments where I could highlight when she had an opportunity to lead in a positive way or giving her an opportunity to lead in a positive way, our relationship started changing. And pretty soon she was controlling like the behavior problems in the class and I didn't have to. And that was great.
Gotcha. So that's really important, I think, for educators and parents to kind of see those qualities in their child, those qualities that might not be as pleasant to experience on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Reframe it to see how you can change the way you not only look at it, but the way you kind of have identified or labeled it, and then build off of the flip side of that behavior. I think that's really important. I think even at the younger age, so I've worked with kids usually like preschool through 5th grade. And so even with those younger kids, I'm sure kids, if they have any negative behavior, teachers talk as they go from grade to grade, and you share your experience with that child, with the next teacher. And sometimes that can create a bias before that new teacher ever had an experience with that child, which is not fair and puts that kid at a disadvantage right off the bat. But if you have that thought process to reframe those behaviors, how they're manifested, then I think you could give more detailed and clarifying information to the next teacher. And just instead of just saying like, this one's gonna talk a lot, this one is gonna do the opposite of what you say every time. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And it is true. Like there is a reputation that travels with the kid from teacher to teacher. Unfortunately, it's not always in a good way, but it does happen on both sides. And I remember when I would get those reports, and again, remember I've already gotten a thinking pattern of looking at it from a different perspective. So when I would get those reports, I'd be like, I'm going to pay a special attention to this kid, but I'm not just looking for the negative behavior. I'm looking for what can I do with what I see? How can I help that kid do it better, be better, those kind of things. And so I think what we're kind of getting into, Tiffany, is like the dynamics of having leaders and followers amongst the kids, amongst the student body in your classrooms and in your schools. And reframing a lot of those negative behaviors that we see as putting it in a category. Is this kid displaying leadership qualities? Is this kid displaying follower qualities? And to know that neither one is bad. Yeah. It all depends on how the behavior comes out.
Yeah. And as we talk about leaders and followers, sometimes you can start to attribute those labels to kids, just seeing how they operate in the space with their friends, at school, maybe in social gatherings. And so I think we can ask our audience what they feel like are some qualities and characteristics of a great leader. So I'm going to pitch a question out there, so that we can kind of get your input. If you're watching live with us, go ahead and drop down in the chat. What are some characteristics of good leaders? Let's see what comes up in the chat.
And there are so many. And so like I would just invite people to think about, who do you think of as a good leader?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing them that makes them that great leader. Or, you know, when you think of followers also, like what do you think of when you see a follower?
Definitely. Let's see here. I saw some notifications come in on our page here. Let me check it out. Paula King says teaching at home first. We got Wanda saying a good leader in my kids is that all the other kids want to be their friends. Yep, that's definitely. Tisha says open-minded. Being open-minded makes the quality of a good leader as well. Those are all good. I definitely see a leader as being strong-minded, somebody who is very focused on the task and the end goal. That kid in class who wants to know, well, what's going to come up next after we do that? And then after we do that, then what is going to happen? Like that kid. That's a planner. And I think of a good planner when I think of a good leader. They have a plan in place to get to that end result.
And usually that planner, it also rolls into being a good problem solver, because they are trying to plan ahead and get things laid out. They problem solve to figure out what's the best way to do that and accomplish that goal.
Yeah, we got another comment in the chat about characteristics of leaders helping others. This viewer says she has one kid that likes to help the younger kids. So being that helper definitely is a great characteristic of a leader. And I wonder how many people associate that with leadership too, instead of just giving directives. You do this, you do that.
I mean, that's a good point, because that's kind of in our society, that's the first thought when you think of leader, is you're telling everybody what to do. And I feel like if we really think about it, like as adults, when we think of our leaders and we think of leaders who do that, they're the ones that we complain about the most, versus a leader who's trying to be helpful and being a servant leader.
Yeah, definitely. So in this day and age that we are living in now, we have social media. That term influencer comes up a lot. What do you think about that being a good quality of a leader, the influencer?
I think leadership is influence. And I listen to a lot of leadership books. One of my favorite is John Maxwell, and that's one of the things that he says, that leadership is all about influence. If you're a good leader, you don't have to have a title. You have to get people to listen to your ideas, to be open, like you said earlier, like Tisha said earlier, be open-minded to things. So influence is leadership. I think they're one and the same. You can't be a leader without having influence. Who are you gonna lead?
Very true. Very true. So that student who has a lot of followers on TikTok, who maybe has a great social media following, they can actually have qualities of a leader and not just be seeking attention and likes. If you reframe it. Yeah. You mentioned problem solver, being a good problem solver too. How do you feel about that being, how can you describe, how that attributes to a good leader?
Yeah, so the kid that is going to do what it takes to get what they want. Think about it from the negative perspective first. You tell a kid they can't get something or they can't do something, and they are trying their hardest to do it and get it anyway, because that's determination that's wrapped up in there. Well, the fact that they're trying to figure out different ways to get around the rules that you said,
Mm-hmm.
that you set forth in them, that in itself makes them a problem solver to me. So, instead of always telling them you can't do this, you can't do that, or you have to do this the way that I said, sometimes it's okay to ask the kid, well, here's the thing we're trying to achieve. How do you think that done? And then watch their wheels turn and see what happens.
Yeah. And I like to point out that while we give all these qualities and we talk about the different ways that, you can open up opportunities for kids, there's always a time and a place for these qualities to come through, right? In the classroom, there's a time when, as a teacher, you're in that leadership role and it is what you say it's going to be. And all of these leadership qualities can sometimes butt heads with that. But it's all about how you reframe it and then how you respond in that moment. Whether you just give a very short redirection, like now, thank you, but now is not the time, or you acknowledge what they said and maybe you point out we'll come back to it next time, or if that's not how I want to do it this time. So that vocal kid who's always chiming in and always got an opinion about something, could that also be a good quality of a leader?
Well, if I have a leader who does not voice what they think about situations that I know they feel are wrong, for example, and they're just going to go with the flow and just do whatever they've been told to do, then to me, that's the opposite of what a leader is. And so a leader at some point, somebody who has influence, has to be vocal about what they think they want to do in situations, how they feel about situations. So definitely, I think you need to be vocal.
Yeah. And definitely understand that balance between using those qualities of good leadership for good or using it for bad. We can think of many examples in society, in our history.
So have you ever thought about, okay, so we think about like who was a great leader? Like, I don't think anybody would, go against us saying Martin Luther King Jr. Great leader, right? Did some amazing things through his ministry. But then, well, if you flip it and ask, well, who was a bad leader? Like some people would probably say like Hitler. And I would have to disagree with that, because a leader is somebody who has great influence. And even though it was used in the wrong way, Hitler was an amazing leader. He influenced people to do heinous things in his time, but it's influence. So I feel like part of what we need to do with our kids is understand that influence and leadership goes both ways. We want to do what we can to make sure we're leading the kids in the positive direction and steering them away from the negative.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as parents, I think our role at home is, if the teacher approaches us with, you're labeling all of the bad attributes of their child, the ones that are causing a disruption, then maybe you as the parent, after hearing us talk tonight, can help that teacher reframe. Like, yes, I agree, they shouldn't talk out in class because there are certain rules that you need to follow in the classroom. However, I see being very vocal as a quality of a good leader, and perhaps we can look at ways to help the student entrance to some of those leadership type roles, whether it be a club at school, extracurricular activity. I don't know. How have you seen that kind of come in full circle in your classrooms and your teaching experience?
Well, I've seen, let's take the vocal kid for the example, the one who always raises their hand for every single thing, no matter what. And like most of those times, you really don't know whether they're going to be right or wrong. You really don't know if it's going to be on topic. Like, it's just a roll of a dice, okay? Or they're always getting out of their seat. especially the ones who get out their seat and say they're trying to help other people all the time, but it's just at the wrong time in class. I've found that if you give that student a job to do, if you give them some sort of responsibility that is theirs, especially if it's a situation where you can put them responsible over a student or two or something that deals with the whole class, you get a completely different child. And I know from experience because I have one in my classes right as we speak.
Nothing like that lived experience to inform your the information that you put forth to others to share. Always the lived experience is the best.
Lived experience is everything. And so some examples of jobs that I've given the student are like anytime I need papers handed out, that's your responsibility. Okay. Or I'm going to let you lead this part of the lesson. So if there's some slides or something that needs to be read off and questions asked to the rest of the students, I can let that student go do that. And that student has done an amazing job every single time. I kid you not, every single time. So just some ideas. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small, but as long as it's a responsibility and they feel like they have some control or some authority.
Gotcha. So I know that sometimes being a follower can have a negative connotation, but there are places I think in the dynamics that go on between kids at school, the dynamics between in social settings outside of school, where being a good follower doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, because we can't just all be leaders all at the same time, right? Somebody always takes the lead. You know that in any profession that you've been in. So the same is true here. So I feel like for followers, even though they may not, you might see a kid who doesn't speak up. They seem to, not really use their voice, kind of the opposite of what we talked about with the leader. They're not as vocal, seem to not really have an opinion. Perhaps they're waiting to hear the opinion of others before they chime in, which is synonymous with being thoughtful, right?
Absolutely. Because everybody can't talk at the same time. Everybody can't lead at the same time. Lead means there's someone in front and there are people following them. So I agree. I don't think we necessarily need to put a negative connotation on the word follower, especially in this social media age, because like that's kind of a big deal in social media, getting followers. It doesn't have to be bad. So like, what do you think are some ways we can help people reframe this idea? Like, what are some situations where a kid would need to choose to be a follower versus trying to be the leader in that situation?
Yeah, this is where I think good conversation with your child and with your student is very helpful to help them understand when they can slide into that leadership role or that follower role. If you have really strong skills in an area, then that might be the time for you to take a leadership role. If you know that this activity or this event isn't well suited for what you're good at, then perhaps you take a follower role and you become that good, thoughtful helper, assistant to the leader. So I think it's a good activity to kind of take like a skills inventory. I'm sure you've probably done that before. I know I have, as I was trying to navigate, adult life and figure out what it is I wanted to do with myself. But just having like a short like skills inventory. What are you good at? What are things that come easy to you? What are things that you really enjoy? And then those are areas where they can step to the front and have that leadership. What are some things that are more challenging for you, that are harder for you, that maybe you don't enjoy as much? Okay, that might be the time when you fall back and now you can be the follower, because that might not be a situation or an activity where your skills flow. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with having those moments of being a follower and shifting between those two roles. What do you think?
Absolutely. So what I hear you saying is basically you lead in situations based on your strengths.
That's right.
Because I believe that you came on this earth with certain gifts and talents for a reason. So if there's a situation that your gifts and talents are best suited for, then that's probably a situation where it would be good for you to lead. But if they're not, then like if I go try to sing in the choir and I know that that's not necessarily my gifting, then I'm not going to be up there trying to tell everybody else how they're supposed to sing their notes, right?
Exactly.
So, and Ms. Wanda asks, like, how old do we think a child needs to be to assign them like a role or something, or give them a responsibility in class? And I would just say my kindergartner, his class, his teacher has assigned roles for the class at that age, and they know exactly what they're supposed to do in that role, when they're supposed to do it, and when it's their turn to do it. So I think it goes back to relationships. I know we say this every week, but you form a relationship with your kids to get to know them, and you can kind of decide what they're ready for, what they're mature for at that time, and what they're not.
Definitely. And so, always here on Tuesday Talks, we like to provide solutions to the topics that we discuss. So, we have a nice newsletter handout that I'm going to pop the link in the chat for. And if you can fill out this link, then you will get a handy dandy newsletter that will give you solutions for how to reframe the behavior into that positive light, both from the teacher perspective and also from the parent perspective, and different strategies that you can use to teach that shift between those roles of leader and follower as well. So be sure to click that link and you'll just pop in your email address and we will get that newsletter right out to you. And so I hope that this was helpful. I love the comments in the chat about not thinking about reframing the behavior. That really was a light bulb moment for me when you shared that as we plan for this Tuesday talk.
Yeah, I mean it was a light bulb moment for me, trying to figure out how to navigate all these different personalities within the classroom and how to get them to mesh together to create a culture that's fun, that's inviting, that's engaging, and that's conducive for learning. So yes, every little bit of nuggets, like it helps.
Definitely, because you can, like we started talking off at the top, talking about at the top of this episode tonight. Our words have power. We talked about that as you reflected on your day and how you were using positive words to kind of reframe how you saw the day. The same is true as we look at our kids as parents and as we look at our students as teachers. The words that we can use to label certain behaviors can also embolden that behavior as well. Like we're feeding it with our words. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I had a coach that said energy grows where energy goes. And so what you just said exactly, if I'm only putting negative energy into that situation or pouring negative energy on that kid, then that's what I'm going to keep getting out of them. And it's not until we switch that, reframe it, like we've been saying, and start pouring positive things, vibes, energies into that, whatever you want to call it, it's got to be positive to counteract the negative. And it's going to be a slow process. Like you ain't going to just say you're going to be nice today and then expect the kid to be nice right back to you. Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
And I think as we wrap up for tonight's Tuesday Talk, I think it's just important to remember that as teachers, you all entered the profession because you wanted to help children.
That part.
And as a parent, you had your kid and you raised them because you want them to become a productive citizen, to show kindness, have resilience, all those good qualities. So I think, like Tisha in the chat said, great. Definitely needed the reminders discussed tonight. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves why we got into the profession, why we decided we wanted to have kids in our lives, because that can get lost in the day-to-day struggle. So sometimes just having that reminder, and I hope that others kind of feel that same reminder as well through what we discussed tonight too. Awesome.
Absolutely. This was good, Dr. Tiffany.
This was good. I love it. Always. So be sure to join us always on Tuesdays here on Facebook Live. We also stream to other platforms as well. Be sure to check our stories on Mondays and Tuesdays to get the pages and links to where you can view it live, and always share the replay as well so we can spread the knowledge. All right.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, Dr. Tiffany, I enjoyed it. Everybody, thank you so much for viewing, and we will see you guys next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Have a good night. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Bye.